Okay, you're looking to make the move to Orlando and you want to know everything you can before making the move here. Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about the 15 things you need to know before moving to Orlando. Let's go. What's up, everyone? My name is Cameron Hodge, and this channel talks about making the move to and living in Orlando, Florida, dropping videos for you every single week. So if you want to be informed of when I drop a video, make sure you hit like, subscribe to get notified every time I drop a new video. Also, what I love even more than dropping these videos for you, being a licensed real estate agent in the state of Florida, it's helping you with your real estate decisions when making the move to Orlando, Florida. I love it, and I love helping you guys get to move out here. So there's a number popping up below is how you can get a hold of me, call, text, email. It does not matter when or how. I'm here to help you make the move to Orlando, Florida. So in this video, I'm going to talk about 15 things that I think you should know before making the move to Orlando, Florida. Obviously, this list is very consolidated as much as I could. There's a lot to know, and everyone's situation is different. But I want to cover 15 things that I think are very important before making the move out here. Starting at number one is how humid the summers are. So obviously, it's the South. If you don't already know, it's humid here. And I already knew before moving here how humid it was. So I'm not really saying that like I didn't know before moving here, but I can tell you like it's like when you first get here, consistently, if you haven't lived in a humid environment before, it can really catch you off guard. Ladies, especially if you love keeping your hair a certain way, it can definitely get ruined by that humidity. So be aware of that, especially if you have curly hair and things like that. I can tell you, even if say you really like feeling clean, because there'll be nothing like you go take a fresh shower and you go to walk outside and you're drenched in sweat and it just feels like you're gross all over again, especially when it hits August. So be aware that the summers are extremely humid, and if you're not prepared for that, you're gonna be in for a rude awakening, especially if you're coming from like the West Coast or any other desert-like climate before moving here. It can get very, very dry. I can tell you if you're coming from the Northeast, I can tell you that like growing up in New York, I'm pretty used to it, right? Like our summers can get humid, not like Florida, right? It's definitely a whole nother level, but you're probably more inclined to humid weather than you would be coming from like California, Arizona, Utah, things like that. So if you're not used to it, I really implore you to probably take a trip out here during the summer so you can really feel what it's like living in Orlando during the summer, because it is crazy hot. All right, number two, and that is being prepared for hurricanes. So when you're making a move out here, I tell you, you have to be prepared. Obviously, a major hurricane just went through here, and look, it's the same every time. It doesn't matter this, any recent hurricane or even the last 10, 20 years. Every time there's a hurricane about to come, everyone freaks out. They go to the store and they try and get all these supplies and all these things to be prepared for the hurricane. Look, being prepared for a hurricane comes before a hurricane season even starts. Right. And I'm not going to go down to a huge list of everything you need to have for a hurricane, but it doesn't hurt. Look, especially if you're coming from like California or somewhere who just doesn't really have many natural events, you got to get that mindset, right? Like we still live in a modern society. We have a lot of great things going for us that make things so easy in life, but you have to be prepared for a hurricane. You always have extra water on hand. Understand that when a hurricane is very close to coming, maybe you fill up your bathtubs so that way you have water to use and cook with. And that in case the water pressure goes out, you have a home generator, or sometimes your plan might be just to leave your area and go back home, maybe a different state, maybe you travel away, maybe your life is set up that way to do that. Understand that you need to have all these things in place before a hurricane comes here. And I employ, all of you who are looking to make the move to Florida, even if it's not Orlando or anything else, you need to be prepared for a hurricane. Understand that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you have to go through a hurricane. And also it's being smart, because it might not be if you go through a hurricane, it might just be if you should go through a hurricane, right? Especially look how bad Fort Myers was damaged. It's sad, it's terrible, but at the same time, there are some people who didn't leave. But imagine if you were in that situation. Like if it was me, my family, definitely leave. I'm not going to stay in the past. I'm not going to risk it. I have young kids. Our third was just born last week. I'm not going to risk being in a hurricane. I've been through my worst so far is a category 3. So I'm not going to say I've experienced like the biggest, right? I've been through a category 3. I've been through, signal 5 typhoons over in the Pacific, and I understand what a major storm can be, to that level. And I can tell you, it's, there are certain situations, especially with family. Like my job is to protect my family, and that might be having to leave the state for a period of time until it goes through. So be aware. Also be aware that if for some reason your home does get destroyed eventually in the future, you need to understand and have a plan in place. Even if you don't live in a flood zone, get flood insurance. It's insurance is really hard in Florida. So that's a lot of research, and that's just one of the things you have to accept and be used to when making the move to Florida. Or it might just be making sure you choose your house in a smart location. Look where we built our house. Ours was the only lot who didn't flood in that local area. So look, you have to plan smart making the move out here, and that's one of the things I think everyone should know when making the move out here. And number 3, so you have to be aware of the fact that during the winter, Florida increases in population substantially. Look, it is beautiful here during the winter, and with all that snow heading up north, everyone wants to come to Florida. We call them snowbirds. If you're from Arizona, even like Southern California, you probably already know what this is. New Mexico, you already know. You're already used to people coming to where you live during the winter. It's the same in Florida. Everyone wants to come here. All the retirees come here during the winter and things like that. Traffic gets heavier. Population massively increases. Like, look, you have to get used to it. That you might want to choose where you live because certain areas are going to get very, very crowded during the winter season. Just because everyone wants to come here. Beaches, like resorts, Disney, all of that gets more crowded during the winter than it would be during the hot summers. Yes, it sucks that it's hot in the summer. I can tell you there are certain roadside attractions during the summer that we had the entire place to ourselves. It's insane, right? And I'll deal with some humidity to get that, especially having young kids. Like, I will take getting anywhere to myself. So be aware that you might want to choose where you live around Orlando because it's a big tourist destination, and during the winter, peak season for all those people to be coming to Orlando. Hey, maybe your business revolves around people coming here for the tourists. Hey, so maybe that benefits you, but be aware you need to be used to that because it definitely picks up more during the winter than in the summer. All right, number 4, depending where you're coming from, home maintenance is higher. Now, what I mean by that, right? So I'm not saying, I'm not going to give you any stats or statistics. I'm just telling you my experience. So if you're coming from California, there's really not much home maintenance other than water heaters, and all that stuff still applies in Florida. But those of us who live on the East Coast know with weather, right? Hurricanes could destroy your home. Just even a regular rainstorm could flood your home. Or, there's always termites. There's, water damage. Leaking roofs are going to be noticed a lot faster than looking at Southern California. People, it never fails. December would pop up and people would start throwing tarps all over their houses. I'm like, holy crap, guys. And growing up in a rainy area, if you're used to Florida, if you see any small leak, you got to get it fixed immediately because it's just going to build and build and build and your house is going to be destroyed. Same thing here. All that stuff that maybe in a more temperate climate like Arizona or California, you're going to have to jump on it immediately. And all those things still apply. But there's, like I said, with insurance and flood zones and being in a hurricane area, there's more thought that has to go into home maintenance to make sure you're prepared for when that time or if that time comes. Also, you can't just get away with a cheap roof. There are codes that are in place to make sure that your roof stays more intact, your home more intact. Maybe there's window covers you buy when you move here because instead of just letting nature take its course, you want to be hopefully save as much of your home as possible from flying debris. All of that applies and something you need to be used to when you buy a home here in Orlando and Florida in general. Number 5, how much AC is needed. I think if you're already looking at moving to Orlando, you're probably already aware of this fact, but AC is very important. And look, can you live without it? Absolutely. You're not going to die if you don't have AC, but hey, you know what? It's nice. It's nice to have AC. I don't care what anyone says. And especially if you're work from home or just if you have young kids, it's already hard enough taking care of a baby. The last thing you need is the house to be 90 degrees and full in huge humidity. You know what I mean? It's nice. It's nice to have AC, or if you work outside, it's nice to have AC, but also understand that you need to, factor in that cost when it comes to, owning and running your home because you're going to have more costs. What's funny is because the winters are what they are, your heating costs are pretty much non-existent. And AC not always, tends to be more efficient depending on how old your unit is and, the efficiency level and all things like that. So technically, Florida utility costs are pretty even, right? You might see some spikes during July, August and things like that. But when you look at the entire year average, it's pretty streamlined cost. But it's still a cost you have to factor in when making the move out here. And number 6, and that is the wildlife. Hey, it's Florida. Everything wants to kill you. Does that mean that you're going to have alligators in your backyard all the time? No. You can choose to live away from water and the canals and things like that. And you probably could just never see wildlife at all if you're in downtown. You know what I mean? You can avoid it. But understand that when you go hiking or you go out in nature, there's poisonous snakes, there's alligators, there's still plants that you shouldn't be near. Especially if you're coming, again, from areas that don't have all this wildlife, you're going to have to be prepared to understand that everything wants to kill you. Everything could hurt you. And to make sure that you understand your local environment, if you like to camp and hike and do all those outdoor activities, because you're not just going to go swimming in a random pond and things like that, right? So be smart. And every year there's always those stories, and people who don't live in Florida want to pick it apart and be like, oh my gosh, look, this is why I couldn't live there because of the alligators. I'm like, yeah, like, or even like the Disney situation from, was 10 years ago, something like that, when like the alligator unfortunately got that 2-year-old kid, and it was terrible. Look it up, Google it. I don't remember the exact time that it happened, but those situations happen. But again, it's just like, why are you letting your kid be why are your parents not next to you? And unfortunately, like, those happens all the time. You got to think smart. Be aware that, hey, just because we live in this luxurious society, nature's still nature, and you have to be aware of it, respect it, and be careful of it when going out there and doing things that you normally wouldn't, right? Like in New York, you can go run on a path and probably be okay, unless you're in like the Adirondacks and have bears and stuff. But still, most places you have less wildlife to worry about during the day than you would be, let's say, in Florida. So be aware of that. Same with snakes and poisonous snakes. And that applies even to your backyard. Like, snakes will get into everywhere. So be aware with your kids' toys being left outside. Everything. Just be aware, be smart, be protective. Number 7 is medical care quality. So look, I'm not going to say it's the worst state in the country, because it's not. Florida tends to be not the worst state, but it's also definitely not the best. Overall, what's hard is Florida has a huge retiree population. I do feel that a lot of those factors get factored in. I can only talk about my experience. I can tell you that, with one of our sons dealing with an eye condition, we found that, like, the special care wasn't as best as it would be in other states. Like, it's definitely not the best state for medical care. I'm not going to talk about how the cost and how it applies, because everyone's situation is different, your insurance and all of that. But in terms of like the care and like my experience, it's enough to keep you good and alive. And like, there are specialists in the entire state, but for Orlando in general, it's okay. I'm not like amazed by it. I don't hate it. I think that there are probably, if you're looking just for medical, there's a lot of other states and areas where there's like a higher concentration of specialized medical care. We have hospitals, we have, practitioners, we have, pediatrics and all that stuff. All that stuff's still here. But in terms of like specialists, be aware that depending on what's going on, this might not be the place for you. Or maybe Tampa's better, or maybe Miami's better. Like, you have to be aware that, when it comes to specialists, I do feel you probably have to look statewide instead of just being central to Orlando. Not necessarily. Everyone's situation is different. It's just make sure you look into medical extensively before just saying this is the place and you assume everywhere has the top medical care. And number 8 is housing costs. So what do I mean by this? Is it still cheaper than a lot of other states like New York City or California or even Phoenix? Yeah, absolutely. The average single family home price in Orlando fluctuates around $385, $387 right now. Okay, for Orlando, and that gets cheaper when you go into Polk County and things like that. But you need, or Lake County as well. But you need to be aware that what I mean by that is, like, it's not the cheapest place between taxes and utility costs. Like, this isn't the cheapest place to own a home. It's not the worst. And I still think it's a great place to own a home, especially with how fast it's expanding. Like, imagine what another 10 years is going to do for Orlando. It's going to be nuts. But be aware that, for those of you that struggle maybe getting into a home, you might have to kind of step up. Maybe start with a condo, townhome, and then work up from there. Maybe you do what I love to do, and that's, your house hacks. So maybe you have a home with like an ADU and you rent out the ADU, or vice versa. You live in the ADU, rent out the house, or maybe you buy a multifamily, rent out the other side. Like, you might have to get a little creative if you're someone who's a little bit tighter on budget. That being said, again, it's not the place where I really tell people you're going to save massive amounts of money. Right? Like, assuming your income's staying the same from where you're coming from, it might not be the place where your housing cost is going to be that cheap, but it's still a lot better than a lot of other places. Just be aware that don't expect to like save all this money in housing costs when moving to Orlando, because that is not the case anymore. And number 9, moving close to good schools. Like, it's a newer parent here, but that was not what we looked at when we made the move out here. We got very lucky where the home is located and the schools that are close by, like a charter school that I really love. But be aware that if you have kids, it's already hard enough having to factor all these things in. Make sure you look at schools. There are a lot of great schools around Orlando when you look at surrounding areas, private schools, public schools, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of good options, but you might have to choose certain areas and be smart about where you live in order to get access to those schools. Because you don't want to be caught with your pants down when all of a sudden you find the perfect house and you realize, oh my God, like, the school district is terribly rated. I don't want to live here. By the way, In the description below, I have a link to my website where I have, some information on where you can find about local schools. It has like their ratings and like it goes to like the state websites about education. So you feel free to go and click that below in order to get some more information about choosing good schools for your kids, or just looking at a map in general about where would be a good area for you to potentially live. Or you can reach out to me. That's why I'm here. All these things I'm talking about could potentially save you massive amounts of time, and I can help you create that plan from top to bottom, A to Z, about where you're coming from, how to get here, and I probably can pinpoint almost the exact neighborhood that you should be living in after we have that conversation. So again, click the number below, call, text, email, and I can help you make the move out here to kind of save you some time on that. Number 10, I don't know if this is really like crazy important thing to know, but I wanted to throw it in here, and that's like how many counties are around Orlando. When you look at Orlando on a map, you're like, oh yeah, Orlando, Orange County. Not really. There's like Polk County, Lake County, like Seminole, like all these counties just kind of like are around Orlando. It's actually like a lot of counties that make up the Orlando metro. Like obviously main city of Orlando, Orange County. But what's interesting is like it's not that far, and like all these counties kind of converge together. So be aware, like there are small differences between each county depending on what you want to do. Maybe you want to buy a home and you're like, I want to Airbnb this house when I leave in 4 years, 5 years, doesn't matter. Well, there's different rules in each county and city. So make sure you choose wisely when moving out here so you know what you're getting into. Not a huge thing, but it's something that, like, I don't know, I didn't know when I moved out here, and I felt really ignorant about that fact. I'm like, yeah, Orlando, Orange County, right? And I'm like, oh, you look at a map and you're like, oh, wow. Actually, when you live in the south part of Orlando, like you could be in a number of counties. Wow. So something cool, something I wanted to point out. Number 11, no income tax. Oh my God, I love this. So growing up in New York, getting stationed in California, and me and my wife there, there's always taxes. And Florida's not like obviously it's gonna be the cheapest tax state, but holy cow, I enjoy not having income tax. I enjoy to keep more money from my hours I work. And that's a cool thing. So be aware, even if you take a small hit in income, depending on what you're doing here, or maybe you're making more money, it doesn't matter. You don't pay income tax. And people are like, well, Cameron, the sales tax technically could be higher in some areas. Yeah, no kidding. But I only pay that when I buy stuff. So if you buy less stuff, you don't pay as much tax. So be aware, that's something I thought was awesome. I really love not having income tax. Like, I don't know. I don't like taxes. I want to keep more of my money that I earn. So if you don't know, now you know. 12, guns. You are allowed to conceal carry here, and also I wouldn't say it's a gun-friendly state, but it's a lot better than a lot of places. Looking at you, California and New York, I like to own guns. I love the God-given right that we have, I think, as human beings to defend ourselves. And if you're like me, you like the fact that you are allowed to not only conceal carry, but you're allowed to just enjoy your hobby. I love owning guns. I have a family heirloom, a shotgun from like the 1920s, and I really love it. My kids are a little too young now, but I will be teaching them the safeties and the important things to know about it growing up. But I love doing it. I love skeet shooting. I love the competition aspect behind shooting guns. I also love hunting. I grew up doing it my whole life. And this is a place where I really felt like I could breathe. I could have like I could buy most firearms. Yeah, background check and all that stuff still applies, relax. But it is a place where if you're like me and you enjoy, maybe whether it's a hobby, whether you enjoy, having the right to defend yourself, like this is a state where it is possible. It's not the friendliest state, but it's definitely a state that, it is built into the people here. Like it's common day life. So if you're coming from a place like California or New York, you're going to have a very pleasant awakening because now you have the ability to actually like choose different firearms that make sense. You actually can do things. You can hunt again. Like there's a lot of cool things that go on in Florida that you now have access to without just like losing your entire life savings to try and like even purchase a firearm, right? So that's a cool thing I love about Florida, and Orlando is very cool. Obviously, the center of the city has its own restrictions, but if you're like me, you like to live in the outskirts, and I really enjoy the fact that I have that ability back in my life. 13, this is subjective, not everyone will agree, but I think people are a lot friendlier here. What's funny is like even if people are like rude in the city, they tend to keep it to themselves because that's the southern way. And sure, there are bad people everywhere, but I can tell you that even when we first came out here just to look at areas, we rented an Airbnb, the neighbor knew that, and we still had like an hour conversation with the neighbor about the area, what we do, what she does, and like I don't know. Coming from a lot of places, I live on the West Coast and things like that, like I haven't seen that in a while. Like it's cool around Orlando, you can still find towns and areas and communities that will actually talk to one another. It's not the, you pull in the garage, close the door, and you never see your neighbors ever. Like that's ridiculous. And I really feel you can find that opportunity for anyone here in Orlando. But again, you have to choose the right area and make sure you choose well, because look, there are bad areas. There are areas that are not for you. And that's why it's important to reach out to someone like me or just do your research, because you want to make sure you choose the right area, because the wrong area is just going to cause more pain to you and your family when making the move out here. 14, and that's flood zones. So I talked about this already, but I'm going to bring it up as a main point now. When you go to buy a home, especially everyone with the news of the recent hurricane, is like flood zones, right? My house is in a flood zone. I knew that getting into it. I did my research. Be aware that if your house is in a flood zone, and flood zones change all the time, that if that is something that's going to, not only will you pay more in insurance, it also could mean devastation for your home. And there's different levels to flood zones. So be aware, if that's a concern you have, make sure you buy your home smartly when coming out here, because not only will it cost you more in the short term and long term, it could be a situation where, you know, even if you aren't in a flood zone, you probably should get flood insurance and just pay for it anyways. So I really recommend factoring that in, because like when major hurricanes come through, as we've seen, people, I mean, you can look up videos right now in Kissimmee, like they were driving airboats down the roads in there from the flooding in some areas. So you have to understand that even if you're not in a flood zone, it could still flood. It's Florida. It's just a way of life here. So be aware that even if you're not in a flood zone, you know, you choose wisely, buy smart. Like technically there are like a small community here where you can find homes that are a little higher elevation. Other than that, like they don't really exist in Florida. Come on, it's all flat. But make sure you buy smartly when coming out here, because you need to be aware of those flood zones and that they do exist and can cost you more in the long run. 15, the last thing is, I didn't know this when we went into it, but how easy it is to fly out into Orlando. Because Orlando is such a major airport, like unlike a lot of other areas around the country, more airlines are creating more flights here. Like if you fly internationally, Orlando can probably give you a better deal than a lot of other places in the country. Like people vacation here, there's a lot of packages. So now if family and friends want to visit you, you probably can get a good deal for them coming here. And like there's so many cool things about living here. So if you're afraid about people visiting you or seeing you or the cost, I implore you to understand that it's gonna be cheaper than in Tampa, because Orlando is just such a main hub that you really can get a good benefit for living here. And that's one of the things that amazed me, especially since once we moved here, like everyone and family and friends are like, when can we come visit you? Like you guys didn't want to visit us when we were like 20 minutes away from you in California, but now all of a sudden here in Orlando, they're like, when can we come visit? It's Orlando, it's Florida, Disney. And hey, if that's something that you want to do, go for it. But I can tell you that if you want to fly back home or have people come to see you, you're probably gonna be in a better position. I mean, I still remember in the military when I would have to fly back to Buffalo, New York in order to drive home, like tickets were always like $1,200 round trip for one person, no matter where I was going from. Like no one wants to fly to that airport. There's so few flight options. It's just like you're always spending tons of money to fly to and from. Where in Orlando, like it's a main airport. So you actually have real flight options, real options to fly to and from for a better price. So, hey, if that's something that concerns you, I can tell you that you have better options with flights here than you do in a lot of other places. So huge benefit, and something that really surprised me when I moved out here that I didn't know before. All right, so that was 15 things I think you should know when making the move to Orlando. I hope it gave you insight. I hope it kind of got your mind churning with some ideas on what you should or should not know. But if you want to know even more things or help plan for your move out here, this number popping below, again, is how you can get a hold of me. Call, text, email, anytime. Does not matter. I'm here to help you in making the move to Orlando, Florida. This is literally what I do. I don't mess with people. I don't try and pay for business. I literally just try and give you benefit to help you make the move out here, because we definitely did a lot wrong when we moved out here, and I don't want that to be you. So hope you got value in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.